southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.
What's going on, guys? Tristan and Tony back with another episode of the One Hell of a Life Outdoor Podcast. Today we got Dr. Kelly O'Neill from UF Game Lab in Florida, and they specialize in all kinds of cool turkey research. And obviously, with the time of year, we're excited to have her on. And also, if you guys listen to us, you know we care a lot about Florida and just the overall conservation of different species there, and such a unique landscape. So, Dr. Kelly, thank you for taking the time to come on today, and would love to just, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and just telling us a little bit about UF Game Lab. What you guys do there?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk turkeys with you guys. So yeah, I'm a postdoctoral associate at the UF Game Lab at the University of Florida. And what we do generally at the UF Game Lab is basically any turkey research that you can think of. We are trying to understand what influences turkey populations, both in the wild by monitoring populations of birds in the field, their survival, their nesting success, and so on. And also we have a captive turkey population. So my position, basically I was hired to start up a captive turkey population. And I did that last spring. So we were collecting eggs from nests that were abandoned or where the hen got predated on the nest. And we were able to get this information because we had a whole bunch of tagged turkeys all the way across the state of Florida, both in the Osceola and Eastern range. And nice. So we brought these guys back to our field station, hatched them, imprinted them to human researchers, and raised them. And we still have them today. So they're almost a year old, and we've been able to do all kinds of cool research with them at different life stages that we can't do with wild birds.
Yeah, no, that's super, super gratifying, I'm sure, just to take these birds that were, otherwise not going to make it, and then get all this great research, as they've grown, that, like you said, you wouldn't have had access to. Go ahead, Dad.
No, I was just going to say, has there been a program like that, or is this the first time that a captive program like that's been in place?
So there have been a couple. There have been a couple similar things. Like there was one study where they did collect eggs from the wild to do a short test on the poults, like looking at what insects they were catching when they put them outside to forage for a short period of time. But they did not keep them long term, so they were kind of just taking them just for the specific purpose of testing one thing. There was also a captive turkey population in the past that was looking at female mate choice. And I'm not 100% sure how long they kept them around or what kind of, like, how ecologically relevant those conditions were. But as far as I know, there's nothing else on the scale that what we have, or nothing else going on currently like what we're doing.
Now, is like the motivation to start this program, I mean, Florida's turkey population as a whole, I mean, is it like other states where there is some decline and that's kind of why they wanted to start this program, or what was like the 30,000 foot reason they wanted to?
So basically the reason was the funding that kind of originally we got to start this was from the state of Florida, and they just wanted us to answer the question of what is going on with turkey populations. Are they stable? Are they declining or not? Because like to actually say whether populations are, doing well, there's a lot of work that maybe more than you would expect that is entailed, because you have to tag and track birds over a period of time and monitor different what's called vital rates. So, the survival and reproduction of hens, how well the poults are surviving, the mortality rate of males. So all kinds of things factor into that. And we just really didn't have the information. But from individual studies that do exist from specific locations, it varies a lot. There are definitely populations that are declining, and there are populations that are doing really well or have improved. So it's very variable from the literature that's out there.
I gotcha. Yeah, and I would imagine like it just seems like, I mean, we're plugged in with so many folks in like the hunting community, and it just seems like Florida is such a like coveted space to go hunt, obviously because of the Osceola. And I mean, I would just think it's like a checklist for every serious turkey hunter. They got to come to Florida and shoot an Osceola turkey, like it is for duck hunters to go hunt in the timber in Arkansas or whatever it might be. But I would imagine that that demand puts a lot of pressure on the turkeys, at least, I mean, on public for sure, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, that's really currently, you know, FWC, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, that's the regulatory body for determining, you know, how much hunting pressure the population can withstand. And so, you know, as far as I understand as is, they do have regulations in place that control the hunting pressure on the population, and they would be the ones to determine whether that needed to be adjusted or not. As far as I know, there's not really any talk of changing things dramatically. Access to the Osceolas is already kind of limited based on, again, how much hunting can be done on public lands, and then private lands. I mean, Florida is interesting. There's a lot of private land here where the landowners are controlling who gets to hunt on their property. And so in those cases, you kind of have to, you know, get like a private outfitter or know the person who owns the land or something to be able to access them.
Sure. Well, I mean, I would take it as if, you know, FWC obviously is taking data to make these decisions. So, I mean, it must be a sign that there's, you know, seeing healthy populations enough to justify like, hey, you know, keeping hunts going down there. So
yeah, it's very complicated because, you know, we don't, like FWC included, anybody who cares about turkeys, we don't really want to change policy if there's not a lot of data to support it, because so much of the money from you know, the hunting community and hunting organizations is like what allows us to protect them and to have funding to research them. So it's like we don't want to, you know, jump the gun when it comes. Those are like really big decisions, and that's part of the reason the state, you know, had given us this money to figure out what was going on with populations, because, you know, even the state of Florida, we make a lot of money from people coming here to hunt the Osceolas. So, you know, they don't want to change things, but they also don't want the populations declining. So they just want information to be able to find out what we do need to do.
I wish that message could be so much stronger. And, you know, that is so important that, you know, there's so many, we talk about it so many times on our podcast where, you know, you always have your naysayers of like, you know, we're big into conservation. We go to fundraisers and we do all these different things that we can afford to do and support it, of course, through our media outlet. But, you know, the thing is that more people need to hear what you just said. And that is like, you only have this resource because here you pay for your licenses, you pay your taxes, all these things. But full circle, that's a great example of how this circle keeps going. You know what I mean? And that's so awesome. I'm so happy that you mentioned that.
Yeah. I mean, part of a really cool thing about this position has been learning about where all the funding comes from and trying to get funding and stuff, because it's not like, you know, in some aspects of research, you're really just depending on federal funding. But with game species, there's a lot more options because there's private organizations, there's the state, because again, they are making all of these regulations to control hunting and management. So yeah, it's definitely something that we like have been seeing and working with hunters and like hunting organizations is like they play a really big role in us being able to do research on these.
Well,
that's awesome. Yeah, and you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and just from having other professionals like yourself on, I mean, from different states, it's not always just one source either where this money's coming from. Sometimes it's a collaborative thing, multi-state to study a species. Sometimes, like you said, it's private organizations, and somebody's got to go out and ask for that money. It's not like people just come up and go, "Hey guys, got $1 million dedicated towards this research program." And I mean, yes, there are nice people, there are great donors, and there's things like that, and great organizations that help push that stuff, like Turkeys for Tomorrow, or or Ducks Unlimited, or whatever it is, But it's not always as easy as just, okay, we got this funding and now let's go do it. There's a lot more stuff involved.
Yeah, and it's also continuous, like you're always trying to get funding to be able to continue what you're doing. And like my position is fully grant funded. The captive turkey population, it costs money to keep them at this field station, to pay for their daily animal care. Somebody has to take care of them every day. They need food. We need technicians, like all of these things that us being able to continue to do it, we have to keep finding more and more money.
With kind of circling back to, we were talking about, kind of brought hunters into the picture as far as like, the population and the effects on the population. But with what you guys are studying in Florida or what has been seen in Florida, as far as like what's affecting the poults and the nesting rates and all that, is it similar to what other
Experience the best of Florida's Forgotten Coast with Williamson Outfitters, offering professionally guided fishing charters and coastal adventures. From chasing inshore favorites like redfish, trout, and tripletail to heart-pounding shark charters, every Williamson Outfitters trip is led by a seasoned, licensed captain with true local expertise. Book one of their many popular experiences like nearshore mahi-mahi fishing, nighttime flounder gigging, scalloping in St. Joe Bay, or wild alligator hunting. Whether you're planning a family vacation, a trip with friends, or a corporate retreat, Williamson Outfitters' fleet of well-equipped boats and experienced guides deliver first-class outdoor adventures for anglers and sportsmen of all ages and experience levels. Call or text Captain Chris at 850-251-8650 or visit floridaducks.com to reserve your charter today. Williamson Outfitters, making the Forgotten Coast unforgettable.
Other states see as far as like mesopredators, or is there anything in Florida that's like you wouldn't expect that's affecting these poults or nests?
The habitat.
The habitat,
well,
or whatever it might be.
I would say something that is especially relevant in Florida is development and habitat destruction. Because if you look at Florida and how land use has changed over time, it's just development everywhere, especially anywhere near the coast of the state.
Sure.
And we actually have seen how much that affects turkeys because we have this really cool thing called the Florida Wildlife Corridor.
Yeah, I saw the thing with the panther documentary.
Yeah, so it's is really important for probably a whole bunch of different species, but basically it's just a series of interconnected lands. So there's a lot of public lands that are in it, private, there's incentives for private landowners to get their land in it. And it's just basically trying to connect habitat so that we don't have all of this, if you look at like an urban area, it's just maybe small parks or nature preserves and then highways and everything all around it and houses. So having this like interconnected landscape is really important. And we've actually seen that, especially for the Osceola turkeys, because South Florida is worse in terms of development. Turkey populations that are living in the corridor are doing a lot better in terms of survival and reproduction. And there's been even already a few new publications specifically looking at the Florida Wildlife Corridor in relation to turkey populations. So, thankfully we have that corridor and that's really great, but that just goes to show how detrimental development is when you don't have any kind of solution for all of this development and habitat fragmentation.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, obviously just the turkey is important, but I mean, the Path to the Panther, if you guys haven't seen that documentary, I'm sure there's the black bear, I'm sure there's all kinds of species that really, you know, are enjoying the same benefits of having that Florida wildlife corridor. Do you guys, so with the research that you guys have done from the ones that you captured and have raised, I mean, what are some of the things that have been surprising that you guys have learned, or is there any, I guess I'm just interested in what that process looks like from when it started to where it's at.
There have been so many surprises. Okay. The first thing is like how hard it is to keep poults alive, even when you are trying to keep them alive in captivity and not letting them starve or not letting them get eaten by predators. Just how fragile and sensitive they are. And like, so in some ways they have like really amazing instincts for survival, but like in other ways, like, I don't know, I feel like our biggest take home from like seeing these guys is like, how are they even not extinct? Like, how are these things surviving in the wild? Because they will try to drown themselves, like they will just get into any trouble that they can. Yeah, they're just so sensitive. Like they could get wet. Like we had a poult that got wet because a thunderstorm rolled in really quickly. And this was when we were doing this foraging experiment with them. So we're outside in this vegetation plot. They're running around foraging. And it started raining really hard. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to collect the poults and, get them out of the rain. And even just like how wet they got in the time that it took me to collect them, they were like shivering and like not moving and stuff. And as soon as they got dried off, 3 of the 4 of them were back to normal, but one of them kind of had this like, I guess, sort of domino effect from it, where it was maybe influencing, like she was too cold, so she wasn't active enough, so she wasn't eating enough, like, and it took like days of like basically this poult being in like what we call the poult ICU of like, we're syringe feeding it sugar water, we're syringe feeding it mush food, we have it in all of like the perfect conditions under a heat lamp, like just to get it to recover from that one instance of being wet. And it's like,
wow,
how are these guys surviving? Like, how do they never get wet when they live in Florida where there's summer storms and their nesting season does overlap with those summer storms to some extent?
No, that is super interesting. And we had just recently the Jason Lapardis, the CEO at Turkeys for Tomorrow, on, and he was talking about how turkeys are to your point, are somewhat, while they're so smart, they're also kind of like dumb. Like he was saying that like I forgot what he said, but like a hen could like take their poults back to the same spot day after day. That like, okay, little Jimmy got ate by a hawk yesterday, and then it just goes right back to the same spot the next day. You know what I mean?
No, what he was saying, year after year it occurs. It's just that
okay.
Yeah, like let's say that there's high predation in that nesting area, it won't travel far from there to try to, it's not like a lot of other animals where they're like, all right, I'm getting out of Dodge, I'm going to go here. You know what I mean? It's just, he made it kind of seem like as if they don't tend to have a lot of strong ability to separate themselves from predators in those kind of situations. But
yeah, I mean, and our turkeys are interesting because, they're not actually, predators can't get to them, but there are predators that will come up to the surrounding areas, and we've definitely seen them like go towards predators that were on the outside of the aviary. So, but it's like we've also seen a lot of anti-predator instincts, like them, being really perceptive of predator noises and predator cues. So, and we also know that in the wild, turkeys gobble up predators. So it's like it's a mixed bag. Like there's some ways where like their instincts seem so good, and there's some where they almost seem like, maladaptive. And I mean, maybe there could be a reason to, that example that, Jason provided. Like, who knows what else was going on that maybe made her continue to choose that location over other locations. But yeah, it is just crazy that they managed to survive. I mean, they lay their eggs on the ground. They're just on the ground on the forest floor.
Wow.
The poults can't fly when they hatch, so they're running around on the ground, and they're just little bite-sized, easy-to-catch things. They can't really get away from predators, other than staying near their mom so that their mom can kind of try to protect them. There's not much they can do until they get to the point where they can fly, and then their survival goes way up after that point, because at least they can fly into like a low branch and get away from a lot of ground predators that way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Do you know, because I think I read in Georgia it's like 1.75 to like 1.93 like poults per year or whatever, poults per hen. What do you know what Florida like ballpark is on that? I'm just curious, because I know like Georgia, they said back in like the heyday was like 3 to 4, so like they say, I guess,
you talking about the survival rate.
Yeah. I guess 2 poults per hen is considered like a stable or growing population.
So you mean like that's how many poults per hen, like by the end of the poult stage?
Yeah, that make it all the way to adulthood.
Yeah, so even within Florida, in terms of like where there has been poult survival being reported, it does range a lot, but from what I've seen, I want to say like 60 to 89% mortality overall.
Wow.
So again, like 89% mortality is like, the worst, populations that are doing the worst in terms of, poult survival. And then if there's some that are doing 60% mortality, that's really good.
Right.
So yeah, it does vary from what I've seen, but overall, even poor survival, like you said, can, they've kind of evolved this strategy to have a lot of young because predation is high. So even a survival rate that seems kind of low can still be enough for stable populations, but some of these populations that are doing really bad, like 11%, if you put that into any sort of population modeling, that's probably going to lead to a negative population trajectory. So, poult survival is an important component. And it seems to vary a lot. And also people report it differently or measure it differently, because we don't have a lot of people that are actually putting tags on poults and monitoring them long term. Mm-hmm. So the data is very limited and incomplete. It's more like people tracking the hen and trying to see how many poults she has, and then coming back a week later, tracking the hen, seeing how many poults she has. So, the data is also just not very consistent or good, which is part of the reason we wanted to do this, like, captive wild turkey research, because, we don't have them all getting eaten, and we can sort of see what's influencing their growth and development.
Sure.
But, yeah, these methods there are increasingly more, technologies that can be used. You can put GPS tags on something as small as a poult now. Wow. But it's not, it's very expensive, and most of them are going to get eaten, so it's still hard to pull off.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Next thing you know, you're following around a coyote for 2 days, and you thought you had a poult that you're like, how come we can't find this thing? But
it's like, gosh, that poult covered a lot of ground. I don't know.
Oh yeah, our field crew has gone through some crazy lengths to retrieve tags. There was one that was found in a python.
Wow. Well, I believe it, but holy cow, that's crazy.
Wow. Do you guys? I know the study's so infant in its length. Yeah, but have you guys noticed any difference between the behavior of the Easterns versus the Osceola poults?
Not at all. And we have taken so much data on their behavior, both when they were little poults and, up to now where they're almost a year old. We even have seen Osceola turkeys mate with Eastern turkeys because like just recently, as in like just last week, they started mating. So they don't seem to act any differently, and they don't seem to perceive each other any differently based on subspecies. So it seems like the subspecies difference is mostly morphological, like there's differences in their feather coloration and stuff like that. But other than that, we're not seeing like much difference in terms. I would guess that maybe the Osceolas are probably less sensitive to heat. Well, it's not something we've tested, but they're living in, it is significantly hotter in South Florida compared to North Florida. So I mean, there might be some other physiological differences like that, but in terms of like behavior and interaction, they don't seem to know the difference.
Interesting.
Yeah. And in the wild, there is a hybrid zone. From what we understand, they do hybridize in areas where they overlap, so they mate with the other subspecies.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's what I was going to ask, because surely that's there's got to be a buffer zone there. No, that's crazy. When you guys are studying and doing these studies like the one you did with taking them out and they got rained on, but you guys were looking at what they were foraging on. What is like that in particular? I mean, what are you hoping to find? Just, I mean, is it as simple as like what they're eating from day to day, or what's like the goal of just a study like that?
So the most important goal, and this is something that we like are pretty much done with, at least our our preliminary data from last year. So this will be something that's getting but yeah, the really important thing we were trying to learn is how vegetation characteristics influence poult growth. And so every brood of poults was assigned to a specific vegetation treatment where we had planted different combinations of things. So the vegetation differed in things like just the overall ground cover, the vegetation height, the presence of different types of functional groups of plants, so like forbs versus grasses. So we basically just had each group foraging in very different conditions so that we could and like kept everything else the same. So we could isolate what vegetation characteristics are making them grow faster during their foraging trials. The reason that we did that is because we think that's a really huge thing affecting poult survival in the wild, is having access to habitats where they can efficiently and grow fast enough. Because what I said about how once they get to flight, their survival goes way up. But the better that they're able to forage when they're young, and the faster that they're able to grow, they can probably get to that point sooner, which means less time stuck on the ground getting gobbled up by predators. And we wanted to be able to tell people, because there's a lot of people who are really interested in trying to manage their land to improve turkey populations. So, if we can tell people what vegetation characteristics are really important, be it planting, more forbs or just having certain types of cover structurally, it's something that people can use to provide that habitat. Because, the vegetation that they're in determines how well they can move through it, how well they can catch bugs, how many bugs are even there to begin with, how protected they are from the elements, if they have some cover from rain or sun. So lots of different things are just completely determined by what vegetation they're in when they're out foraging.
Gotcha. Okay,
interesting. Yeah. I guess while we're on the food side of it, what is there a way to say like so much of a turkey's diet is insects versus they're just eating these plants, these leaves, or whatever. Is there a difference, like, or is it just kind of varied? I mean, on a whole lot of things. That'd be a hard question to maybe answer.
There is some data out there that have looked at, what poults are eating. And they, during those first 2 weeks of life, so that period where survival is the poorest, they are eating primarily insects. So almost all insect protein. We did see a few instances of our poults eating like the leaves of certain species of forbs, like they were eating like soybean leaves. So we saw a few things like that. Also, what the older that they get, the more that they begin to utilize vegetation. So like, vegetative matter, fruits, grains. So we also saw that our poults ate a lot of seeds, grass seeds and stuff like that. So, they're eating mostly insects, and that, that protein is what's helping them grow so quickly, because they're growing at an insane rate when they're young. So,
do you think there's any like strategy that why they might switch to more of a vegetarian diet as they get older? I mean, is there any kind of reason for how they develop as a turkey for that, you think?
That's a great question. I don't really know the metabolic, what's going on behind that. I do know that, when they are first hatched, it takes them some time to develop their digestive tract fully. And over time, they will eat different things, like different rocks and stuff, that will help them grind up matter. So it may be that it takes time for their digestive system to develop enough to be able to effectively digest plant matter.
Okay.
But I don't know. That's just kind of speculation based on what I know. And also,
All right, guys, if you've been listening to us for a while, you know we love Frog Talk's waterfowl gear. But did you know they don't just make waterfowl gear? They make some incredible fishing organization like the Frog Talk's Tackle Vault 3600. That's one of our personal favorites. Also, the FTX Elite Series is great if you fish hard and need something to hold up to the elements. And what about footwear? Yeah, guys, Frog Talks has you covered there. Everything from hunting boots to deck boots to fishing shoes to casual stuff like the Java 2.0 and flip-flops. I can go on and on, but honestly, you just need to head over to frogtalks.com and use code OneHellOfALifeOutdoors for 15% off your order.
Just the fact that insects are the highest protein option that can fit inside of a poult's beak. It's like the amount of, nutrition that they're getting per thing that they're eating is really high, which is probably important, because it's not just body mass growth, but it's feather growth, getting their wings long enough to where they can start to catch air. So, protein is also probably just the most efficient thing for rapid growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, how weird is it that they eat rocks to help, whatever that does for their digestion? That is so weird to me. I've never understood why that was a feature that
she could probably tell us. He's probably the one so tell us and everybody else why birds do that. Why? Well, because it's not only them. I mean, doves do it.
Yeah, it's weird.
Oh man, I don't know. I'm not a physiology expert by any means. So, and I'm, like you said, I'm sure that there is somebody who specializes in the evolution of bird digestive systems, but yeah, that might be outside of my scope. Why they've come
weird
to depend on that.
Yeah.
But it is crazy to me, and some hunters will keep the stones that they find inside of their digestive tracts, and they're it's basically like a little rock tumbler in there, so they're getting tumbled around and ground up, and the rocks actually end up being really smooth and beautiful and stuff. There are people that have little jars full of the rocks that they found from the birds they've hunted. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, they do, I could speculate some. I mean, they don't have that much mechanical digestion. Like, we chew up our food first. They don't do that.
Sure.
Grab it. They don't have teeth. They don't chew. They just grab and swallow. So like more of the digestion has to happen internally because there's less going on externally.
Okay.
But
that's so interesting. They're just like, yeah, we don't have teeth to chew, so we're just gonna like eat all these rocks. That'll do it for us.
Yep.
No, that's
having these extra structures like the crop and the gizzard that we don't have because we don't really need that.
Right. Right.
When you guys are because I always find this interesting, like how big of a topic like prescribed burns are, and it's like I understand why it can be so beneficial to turkeys because of just like the evolution of like the property where the new stuff grows, bugs come in, it's great, turkeys can see all of that. But like I would imagine just in nature on its own, like I mean I couldn't imagine it be as often as people are doing it as a prescribed thing. I mean I guess my question is like I don't know. I find it interesting that like.
Do you think that the controlled burns are being done more often than what nature would provide itself?
Yeah, that's kind of what.
So are you curious about like how the positive and negativity of that is?
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Like I just don't feel like it would happen that often in nature. You know what I mean? It's great that I know there's great benefits to it, but I mean, have you guys done any of that with the population you have and done any tests with that?
So we haven't done anything with the captive population, but there has been a lot of research on, controlled burns and, in general. And we do know that, especially for like nesting cover and brood rearing cover, the types of habitat that is created within, the first year or two after a controlled burn is really critical to turkeys. To be able to find places to nest where they have cover, but they're not like surrounded by vegetation so that they're not just getting eaten at a huge rate while they're trying to incubate their eggs. And then again, for that, creating that type of vegetation structure that the poults can forage in. Both of those things are really created by burning and kind of have to, like, they kind of only happen or only are in those ideal states. Okay, sorry, my fridge made a really loud noise.
Oh, you're good.
But yeah, they're kind of only really in that ideal state within the first year or second year after prescribed burns. So if people wait longer than 2 years to do another burn cycle, they're going to not have very much of that habitat. And in terms of like how often it would have been happening, in nature, I know that we're really suppressing controlled burns in anyway, like pretty much everywhere.
Right.
But I don't know off the top of my head if there's existing data on how frequently burns were happening, like naturally in Florida, before we kind of like messed up that natural cycle. But just based on like, what we've seen in terms of what burn cycles are ideal for all of the species that live in areas that are fire dependent, I would say it probably was happening pretty often. And maybe it wasn't happening in every single area every 2 years, but maybe there were enough areas nearby where, say turkeys in any given area could find a place to go with their poults and forage that was within a reasonable range to them.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Well, and then there's the whole thing about like, right, and I don't even know how to even form this question for you, but it's like, I guess on the simple form, like let's take the honeybee for example, right? We know just public knowledge, I feel like it's pretty well known that that hey, if we lose honeybees, there's a lot of stair steps that come from that, and it's from simple pollination, fruits, vegetables. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But what I'm curious about is like, you know, when it comes to turkeys, especially in the Florida habitat, like not only what is needed in order to support them. So like say, all right, we need to have pine tree, longleaf pines that have these bugs with these diseases because they create grubs for the turkeys, and, you know, and one thing after the other. Cause like we were talking with, Dr. Emily from Georgia, and she was in charge of, waterfowl and gators. And so we were telling her that there's way too many gators. She said, no, there's not.
I think you're talking about Kara.
Kara. I'm sorry. Kara.
Emily Rushton's the one that, as long as I don't have them mixed up, I might have them mixed up now. But Dr. Emily Rushton's the one that does the turkey for Georgia.
Okay. Yes. Okay. But the funny thing is that, you know, here we were as waterfowlers talking to them more on a waterfowl perspective, while she's like telling us, well, I know that you guys want more ducks, but we're doing a really good job with the gators over here, you know. And I'm like, no, you're doing too good of a job because we're seeing way too many of them out there joking around. So just curious, I hope that, I know that's a really long-winded question, but I hope you kind of understand where I'm coming from with that. Like, I'm sure you guys have a term for that, like when one thing feeds off the other, you know. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Are you asking like what impact turkeys have on other things? Is that what you're getting at? Or
I guess that's really what I'm getting at. Is just like, you know, do turkeys serve a natural place to other plants and animals, I guess. You know, is their function vitally as important, you know, in the whole scheme of things?
Yeah, that is a great question. One thing that I can say for certainty is they're a really important food resource for predators. So things like birds of prey and crows, even, depending on what life stage, and, you know, ground mesopredators, mammals like, you know, raccoons and foxes and coyotes, bobcats, eating adults at least. So, you know, they're huge, and like snakes will eat the eggs. So they are a important, you know, food resource for predators. I would say in terms of other things, it hasn't been very well studied. One thing that we have been doing with the captive population, though, is looking at their role in seed dispersal. And I don't really have, you know, the finalized results to give you at this point, but I can say that what people have kind of assumed is that even if they eat seeds, they're getting destroyed in their system. But what we've seen observationally is that they're pooping out a lot of the seeds. And so if they're eating a bunch of seeds and running around and pooping them out, then, you know, as long as those seeds are germinating, they may be playing a really important role in the plant community, spreading those seeds. And that's like something that we're actually, you know, looking at right now to test. So is, like we've done experiments where we fed them stuff and collected their poop and, you know, seeing how long is it going in their system before it gets pooped out, because that would determine where it's getting dispersed. And then also germination tests. Are the seeds from those, from like, you know, the droppings germinating as well as ones that don't get eaten by turkeys? And they might even get eaten better because there's this idea, it's called scarification, that like the seeds would get like sort of scratched or scuffed up in there, and it might actually enhance their germination. So they may germinate at higher rates.
Interesting.
But that's all kind of new stuff that is just starting to be researched. So I'd say like they're definitely playing a role, but like in terms of how exactly they're important for their, you know, communities as a whole, it's definitely understudied.
There's more to learn there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would imagine that it's also kind of like a little perfect built-in like first little fertilizer for whatever's trying to germinate.
Yeah, that's too.
If you know, looking at what you guys have learned in the last year, like big picture, I mean, if you had to tell people listening, like how, not like exactly to the T, but just like some basic principles on like, if you were going to create a turkey habitat on your property, like let's just keep it as simple as Florida, because that's where you guys work. I mean, what are some things that people can do to, help themselves?
Yeah, well, I will take this opportunity to pitch our online turkey management courses. We have 2 now. So people can look those up, and lots and lots of turkey experts give their opinions and knowledge on what types of management strategies are best for turkeys, but basically they need a very specific habitat at each life stage. So you need places for the females to nest safely. Hen survival on the nest is related to the habitat that they're in. So they do need to have, some ground cover, but like if you don't burn often and there's just like a ton of ground, thick stuff all over the ground, that's the kind of habitat where the hen is going to get eaten at higher rates on the nest, because she can't necessarily see predators coming, or get in an area that, keeps her away from predation. And then once the poults hatch, they need like kind of clearings. So areas where there's not a bunch of trees and stems and stuff, more like ground vegetation, but probably not like typical grass, like lawns. That's probably not great because it's not very biodiverse and probably not sustaining a lot of insects. So more of like native open areas. So like native forb and grass areas, which again, this is the kind of thing we're testing now. But we think that, those kinds of structures are better for turkeys, because basically they can be running around on the ground and, be able to move freely and hunt, but they have this little canopy cover over them. So, I mean, with poults, out in the open foraging, if they can be seen from above, then a bird of prey can get them pretty easily, for example. So, having that cover and area with lots of insects. And then, once the turkeys are older, they need a good place to roost at night. So, trees with branches where, they can get up off the ground, but also kind of be protected overhead from owls and stuff like that might hunt them while they're sleeping. So, basically there's important habitats for every life stage, and any given area where a turkey population is going to do better if it has all of those. So yeah, habitat, vegetation. Not mowing during the nesting season. I will say a lot of the eggs that we got were because people mowed over nests, or they mowed all around nests, and then like you're defeating that like the purpose of all that cover if you're mowing it really short. And the hens, like, even if the eggs are okay, the hen's probably gonna be like, oh wow, my habitat just got destroyed, I'm not gonna nest there anymore.
Yeah.
So there are also like things like that. People that manage property in their open areas, they like to tend to mow them, but that's not good for eggs or poults.
Now just let me ask well, never mind. I was going to ask, there are certain areas that have regulations on how high or how much you can let your, and I'm not trying to be like throwing shade at an HOA right now. That's not what I'm saying. Like, all right, your grass is 6 inches tall. That's going to affect, that's not what I'm talking about. There are state regulations in states where if you own certain open lands, that you are required by law they'll assess fines on you if you do not cut that land. Sometimes it's in agreement with a conservation effort or whatever. But I know, like in the state of Illinois, if you many times, and sometimes it's just within a regulation within that city's bylaws or whatever, that here you have this piece of property, a field or whatever it is, and maybe it grows traditionally, say 5 foot high and tall weeds or something like that. It could be anything from buckbrush to you name it, briars, all that stuff. And they'll require, people will get fined if they don't do that. Now, it could vary state to state. I don't know a lot about that, but I'm just curious if that has anything to do with that outside of just people pleasing their own vision. Pleasing. It's a pleasant. It looks more beautiful when it's mowed. Type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about that either, but my hunch would be I can't really think of any good reason ecologically to require people to keep their grass a certain height. So my assumption is that it would be for aesthetic reasons. And I don't know about the bylaws and stuff, but maybe they would have some type of exception for I know there are some places where people could enroll their land as a habitat for certain things of conservation concern that maybe could exempt them from some of those fines possibly. So again, I don't really know that much details on that kind of thing, but that could be something to look into if people do feel like, they are being forced to do something that's bad for, their turkeys and other things on their land. Because again, or I guess I didn't really mention this, but turkeys are kind of considered an umbrella species because the things that are really good for them are really good for a lot of other things, like everything that depends on early succession, for example. So those, habitats created by fire, they have very similar needs, and areas that are managed for turkeys tend to make all of those other species populations better as well. So what's good for turkeys is good for a lot of different things that people don't care about as much because they're less charismatic or don't have economic value, or people don't hunt them, etc. So
that's interesting. It's kind of like moist soil units, being a.
What's up, guys? If you want coffee that doesn't suck, you probably can guess what I'm going to say. Get the Duck. Dirty Duck Coffee is the official coffee of the One Hell of a Life Outdoor podcast, and they have a great lineup of different coffee blends, everything from Morning Wood and First Flight to Dark Dynasty and Suns Up, Guns Up. You can't go wrong with Dirty Duck Coffee, and they have a great lineup of cold brew cans, mocha, French vanilla, original cold brew, and cinnamon teal snickerdoodle. If you want 15% off your next order, use code One Hell of a Life 15 on your next order.
Net positive for all kinds of, it's not just ducks that I know people build them for ducks, but obviously there's egrets and there's little fish and invertebrates and all kinds of crap that not crap, but stuff that all kind of intermingles in that ecosystem. With you guys are a year in. I mean, what's kind of as this study plays out, as this program plays out, I mean, is there anything that's kind of on the forefront that you guys are really hoping to get out of this? And I mean, I'm not even sure how long could these turkeys potentially live in captivity?
That's a good question because their lifespans in the wild are pretty short, but it's usually because they're getting eaten by predators. So that is one thing that we can, there's a lot of things that our research can add just to basic biological information about these guys. And that would be one of them. What is their maximum lifespan if they aren't dying of predation or starvation? How long can they actually live? Could it be 7+ years maybe? I don't know. And then, that's a question that we'll be able to answer. We've been weighing the turkeys once per week ever since they hatched. So we have really good data on their growth over time, which, in the wild, you couldn't really get that unless you went out and caught the same turkey every week. And then it would probably die of a panic attack pretty soon.
No kidding.
Because they are, very easily stressed. Our captive population isn't because they're used to humans. So a lot of just very basic information. And developmentally, when we were out there foraging with the poults every day, we were recording the first time they do different behaviors. So like, one fun fact that I just love telling people is they were strutting when they were 3 days old. 3 days after hatching, they were strutting, and they were like a little cotton ball. They barely even had a tail, and their tail was like.
Oh my gosh,
that is so awesome.
So there's a lot of just.
Yeah.
There's a lot of basic, just fun, stuff that we didn't know before that we're learning, and now we're getting to learn about female mate choice, because we have birds that are mating now, and we have males that vary a lot in their sort of dominant status, because they have these very interesting hierarchical social organization that we don't really know that much about. So we're learning more about that and how that influences their interactions. We're learning more about how those things play into which males get to mate. So is it some of their characteristics, like their size, their snood length, and how much they're strutting, and we've done a lot of diet selection things, looking at what turkeys eat at different life stages, and how their experience shapes what they eat. So how do they learn to incorporate new food things? But I would say like the most important overarching thing is our work on the poults. We actually have eggs incubating right now for year 2 of hatching poults, and we want to continue to do this several more years and kind of expand on what we had done last spring, to where we're now, instead of just testing different vegetation characteristics and how they influence development individually, we kind of want to replicate like management strategies that people use. So like management strategies that favor like native forbs or native grasses, or more like agricultural forbs. So people that use their land for agriculture, but also want to be useful for poults. So we have like basically different specific types of vegetation structures that we're going to have poults forage in, and then directly compare how efficiently they forage and how quickly they grow in those. And so, I mean, that's just the most critical thing, because it's like just something you could never get in nature. I mean, you can try to look at those poult per hen counts and maybe have a GPS tracked poult and look at where she's choosing to forage with her poults, and are ones that foraging in some areas better than others, but it's just really hard to control for all of the other factors that are influencing that. And so we have this perfectly controlled experiment where everything about their lives is the same except where they're foraging. So that's I would say the biggest thing that is going to be most impactful from this.
Yeah, no, that's awesome stuff. And obviously UF Game Lab has like a pretty solid, it looks like you guys update stuff pretty frequently on social media, and there's a podcast too, right? Like the Turkey Science podcast.
Yes, Wild Turkey Science.
Okay, and can you follow those platforms to kind of get little updates on kind of what you guys do there? Just for anybody that's listening that's curious.
Yeah, you can follow the UF Game Lab on Facebook, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel. So there's lots of little reels that are just fun content, especially from our captive population, because we just get such funny, good footage of them all the time. But we'll also try to put out short videos when we put out new papers, just kind of explaining the results of those papers in a digestible way. And on the podcast, if people comment, questions pretty often, we'll try to, make episodes that are addressing what people want to learn about. So, outreach is really big for us because, so many of, like I said, Florida has a lot of private land. There's a lot that can be influenced just by getting information to people who have the ability to influence land management.
Sure. Are there any ways that that people could support, whether it be through time or monetarily, or what? Is there any ways that people can get involved to support UF Game Lab?
You can. People can donate directly to us. I could share the link, but we have a way to directly donate to our lab for our turkey research.
Nice.
So there's that, and people can donate. There's no minimum amount or anything. They could also get something from their money if they take one of our courses. So like those turkey habitat management courses, it's like you're getting information, that way you're not just giving out money, but that money would still be going directly to our lab. So those are the best ways, because in those instances it goes directly to us. But of course, any kind of, if people want to donate to nonprofits or conservation organizations that give out money, that's always great too. It's just that then it's up to other people to decide, whether to give it to us. And then aside from just donating money or anything like that, people can just watch our content and share it, because it gets our information out there, and increases viewership, and our YouTube channel is monetized as well. So playing our YouTube videos technically is like donating to us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we know how that goes as an outdoor content company.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But one thing that I meant to ask this in the very beginning. What is the size of the habitat? So like, obviously it's not a 4x4 cage for every bird or anything like that. Like, is it like an enclosed netted area? I'm just trying to get a visual, or maybe just direct me to something on social media or YouTube that I could look at that. I'm just curious.
The large flight pens in total are about a quarter acre of space. So when the turkeys were, once they were old enough to free roam, that they were split up into these large flight pens and kind of like free living in flocks. But during the controlled experiments, like the foraging trials, we had sectioned those off into different foraging areas that were separated by fencing, and each foraging area was 2,000 square feet. And that is, our results have limitations because, they are confined to a specific area to forage. But a lot of the previous studies on, other species, like different other types of, ground nesting game birds, where they've tried to look at foraging behavior, they may have kind of put them out in a little pen where they were extremely limited in where they could access. So, we tried to make improvements to what's been done to make it more ecologically relevant, but there are ultimately, limits to how perfectly what we do equates to what happens in nature.
That's right, and support the program and help if they need to and want to make these habitats bigger, they can. So you give those options if you help support the program. No, I just always find it very intriguing with professionals like yourself that do this kind of thing, because so many people, I think, just obliviously go out to the outdoors and they don't realize how much we do as a human race to support those outdoors, especially on public land. Georgia is in Florida in its own right. We grew up, we was in Florida for a dozen years, that kind of thing. And over time, I moved from this swampy place to, wow, there is so much biodiversity in Florida. It really just, I couldn't even wrap my whole brain around it, because I could just spend a whole day, still at 53 years old, 54 now, walking around catching frogs. I mean, that's just me, so I just think it's so awesome. And, we just wouldn't have these resources if we don't have the folks like you that are, and the younger folks that are going to school to do this stuff. And there's a whole gamma of things that go into that to be able to keep these resources that we have and animals that utilize them. So thank you so much for what you guys do.
Yeah, thank you for caring and for supporting us. And, I wish that more people could do this for a living, because it's really, really fun. And like you said, it is really rewarding. And, we just the birds just surprise us all the time, and what we learn and just surprises us all the time. So it's unpredictable.
That's awesome. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out to hop on the podcast with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be sure to tag you guys in anything we put out and any kind of like clips from the video and stuff. But yeah, just thank you again.
Yeah. Yep. And maybe we come into it next year. We'll get another update, and we'll be able to progressively see like, hey, this is where it was last year. This is where we're at this year, and be able to talk about those results. So.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
I've been southbound, I've been hellbound, riding on the midnight train. Going too fast now, think I ought to slow down, standing in the pouring rain.